First of all, thanks everyone for choosing this Frenchman instead of the other Frenchman. They put the two Frenchies at the same time. I don't know. So today I'll talk about React Native and my personal experience learning React Native and coming from an Android background. So a little agenda. I'm gonna give you some context about myself, context about what React Native is. Then I'll talk about what I didn't like. I'll start with what I didn't like so I can finish with a positive note with what I liked after that. And then some conclusion, talking about the app I'm working on. And then some questions at the end. So a bit about myself. As I said, I'm from France, moved to Canada 7 years ago. I've been Android dev since then. And I worked for like different companies over the years, like Texture and Slack, as a senior Android dev. I was actually on the sign up team, like just before Sam joined in, and yeah, he took over the code and replaced everything I did, which was probably a good choice. And then after that, I started to build iOS and Android app for this company called Ride, which is like an Airbnb for like carpooling. And lately I'm working on a React Native app from scratch for a company called Bungalow, which is an Airbnb for long-term rentals. So if you guys have an Airbnb idea, like I'm your guy, apparently. So what's React Native? First of all, like who's using React Native already on a project, like side project or at work? Like show your hands. Oh yeah. We have a couple. Good. So that's what I intended because this is really low level, like really basic talk about like what React Native is and what's good and what's not. So it's cross-platform framework by Facebook. It's an extension of the React framework for the web. For the web dev, it's written, so you write in JavaScript and it generates native widgets. So unlike cross-platform like PhoneGap and Cordova, it's actually real native widgets, like real native screens that you're gonna generate, which is a bit better for the look and feel. And so example, you write like, I want a text, it's gonna generate a text view on Android and a UI label on iOS. It's used by like Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, a lot of big companies, and it's getting really, really popular. So my initial opinion was like kind of like skepticism and also like this is not good. So I found this image pretty funny. Like the cross-platform is like the idea is like, oh, if you want to build an iOS app and an Android app, you're gonna build like a pretty beautiful castle, but like it takes a while to get there, right? But a cross-platform, it's going to be maybe a bit easier, but you end up with like the shittiest little hut thing that nobody wants to look at or play with. So I thought that React Native was like that. And yeah, my thought was like cross-platform apps, like coming from like native, like I know, sorry, how native apps are much better, and then cross-platform apps are like ugly and feel weird. They don't feel like there's something wrong about them. And like JavaScript, really, like no typing, come on, like that's pretty shitty. But I started to do some freelancing on the side and realized that a lot of clients are requesting React Native because for them it's like the best way to have two apps with the same budget as one, right? And it was getting really, really popular. So. And I realized also like I'm building this app for Ride, like Android and iOS, and every time I have to build a new feature or fix a bug, it's exactly the same thing every single time, twice. And like the model classes, the API calls, like everything is the same. It's like there must be something better than that. And also I realized like it would be a good thing to add to my skill set. Like obviously there's a lot of clients requesting it, so maybe I need to open more doors for that. So when Bungalow reached out to me to build like an app from scratch, they said that they wanted to use React Native because they had a lot of JS developers in that team. So I was like, okay, let's do this. I'm going to learn React Native. So to learn that, the curve is pretty steep. And so you need to start to learn JavaScript. And I did JavaScript like 10 years ago, and apparently it changed so much. Like it's now ES6, and there's like arrow functions and a lot of like async await and promises and like stuff that I didn't know that I had to learn. I decided to use TypeScript because, again, I come from Java and Swift and Kotlin, like strongly typed languages. I needed types, so I decided to use TypeScript, but you have to learn that too. You have to learn React, so it's like a new paradigm. It's a new way of building software, basically. So you have to learn that. You have to learn React Native, which is just an extension of that, but there's different stuff that you need to learn there. I decided to use Redux for state management, so it's another step on the learning. It's more like a learning cliff than a learning curve, but NPM, like, yeah, we all know Gradle and CocoaPods on iOS, but this is another package manager that you need to learn. And you also have to change editor, because VS Code is the de facto editor for React and React Native. So yeah, I could also add like how to draw sticky figures on Google Slides. That's like part of the curve. But yeah, it's pretty much like a cliff. It's not a curve. Like you cannot start even writing the first screen if you don't know all of this, right? So that's a bit steep. But I like learning, so I help other people too. Nothing's impossible, right? So the other thing that you need to know is you still need to know the native word. So you need to know, well, we all know here Java, Kotlin, we're Android developers. We need to know also the iOS world. So Objective-C or Swift. You need to know the IDE. So AndroidTO is pretty cool compared to Xcode. Xcode is horrible, guys. Like it's a pain. And why you need to know that? You need to know that for like linking native plugins. So let's say you want an image picker with like picking from a gallery or camera. You need to know how to link that library in Xcode. And believe me, it's not like adding a line in Gradle. It's like it's insane. Build process the same. Like you want to have a staging and prod build like variants. It's completely different on iOS, so you have to learn that as well. Again, another thing that I didn't like, JavaScript is not the best. It's not typed, so I said that TypeScript add typing, but it's still not as good as like Kotlin or Swift. I'm missing like extensions, the null safety, like it's not pure like optional. There is some null stuff, but it's not as good as Kotlin. And I miss like CL classes, like Sam was showing. It's like super useful to do state management. So what I like though, and I think that the first big thing that you're gonna see if you start learning React Native is hot reload. Like how many times we've been like waiting for freaking builds to compile. It's insane. Like we have to wait sometimes 2 minutes to just change a little color, a little padding, right? And with React Native, the idea is like they have this thing called hot reload that you just save your JS file and it's gonna update instantly, like less than a second on the app. And it's like, instant run it's not working all the time. And this is much better than that. And the idea is also like if you're 10 screens deep in your app and you save, you're still in the same screen, still in the same like state, so everything is the same, just like you change the padding. So that's like the number one reason you want to go to React Native is that. Another one is Storybook. So React is the idea of React is you build components, and it can be like just some simple views like a button, or up to like screens. That's also a component. And Storybook is a way to list all your components of your app, with each of your component with different attributes that you can have. So in the example, like have this, actually I use that in the app, in the Bungalow app. have a button that can have a title, but it can have like a loading state, it can have like a disable state. And then Storybook, you can list all your components like that with each attribute. And it's super easy to like just test, oh yeah, I'm missing a padding on the loading screen. You don't have to go in the app and make it load, and like it's isolated way to test every component. So that's pretty cool. The other tool that I really love is ReactoTron. It's like a debugging tool where you can see like, well, obviously debug logs, but you can see also API requests and responses. You can see like Redux actions, you can see errors. You can replay Redux actions and see the Redux store states, like the whole state of the app. You can look at that. So that's a pretty cool tool. Obviously, the main reason you want to do React Native is to be able to build two apps at once, right? iOS, Android. And I was kind of skeptical about that. I thought you had to build a lot of like different code for each platform. But in the end, I'm like reusing 99% of my code. Only a few like if platform.os equal Android. Well, yeah, don't look at the triple equal, that's JavaScript. But if it's Android, then just add this padding, because on Android we want more padding or something like that. It's like, I have like 10 of those, but most of the code is all like the same. The only caveat to that is that you need to have your designers to be on board with that, and you need to have the design to be the same on both, right? The other thing that I really loved is the architecture. So React is, as I said, component-driven. So you build like small components and you compose them. So it's like really the composition over inheritance. And also you like no more activity fragment view. Like sometimes you want to just like build a custom button and you want to reuse it, but it's such a pain to do that you give up and you always like copy paste and stuff like that. And fragment and activity, like the life cycles are insane. And reusing fragment is not that easy. So React is like way better than that. You can reuse components everywhere basically. And Redux is a unidirectional data flow. Like Sam was talking about MVI, but then there's new ones like MVRX and stuff like that. And the idea is like there's only one way to change the UI. So basically the UI is going to trigger some action. The actions are going to be sent to the reducer. The reducer updates the store, which contains the state, and the state defines the UI, and then the UI is going to be updated. And like no more MVP, no more MVVM, no more MV whatever like discussion with your team. It's like this is the way. It's the easiest way. It adds boilerplate, but it's like really great. Other little things that I like the community is amazing. Not only you get the React Native community, so you have like libraries, like the image picker I was talking about. It works out of the shelf on Android, iOS. You have the camera, gallery, everything. It works great, and it's not even like the default React Native package. It's like a open source third party, and so you not only have React Native, but you have React as well. So you get all the packages from React, like Redux and Redux Persist, which is a way to persist all your store for offline purposes and stuff like that. Easy asynchronous stuff with promise and async awaits. If you know Kotlin coroutines, that's kind of the same. So it's super easy, no more async tasks. Well, I hope nobody's doing async tasks anymore. But yeah, so much easier. Easy networking with fetch and JSON. So yeah, retrofit is great, and JSON, yeah, it's pretty cool. But like in JavaScript, it's by default. It's in the framework, and it's a couple of lines, and it works great. JSON was built for JavaScript, so you got it by default. And the other thing that I like is now that I learned React, I could use React for like web dev, which is a pretty cool thing to know. So in conclusion, like building the Bungalow app, I started like 4 months ago myself. I'm the only dev and with zero knowledge of React Native. And I was able to build like 5 fully fledged features, like with API calls and everything. over 22 screens, and so far, like, I haven't seen any perf issue or anything that was blocking me. So the velocity is insane. Like, I would maybe be able to build the same Android app that fast, and I'm not even sure. But I actually have two apps now, Android and iOS. So that's super impressive for me. So if you guys want to start like React Native tomorrow, the best thing I would say is to use the official documentation, which usually I don't recommend because official docs are like boring and they don't work great and they don't show like how to start. Basically, it's that either too hard to understand or too basics. This is like amazing. Then there's reactnativeexpress.com. It's like a tutorial, step by step, and like they increase the level. Like it starts with like beginner stuff and then advanced and super advanced stuff. And then finally, I use a Udemy course called the Complete React Native and Redux course. Amazing course. The instructor is like super knowledgeable, and a little pro tip: I use like speed at 1.8x, and it was like I went through it super fast, and you can still understand everything. It's pretty cool. And then finally, like, what's next, like, for me to learn? Because yeah, obviously in 4 months I didn't learn everything. I went above that cliff, but I think there's still a lot of mountains over there to climb. But basically, like animations, I haven't really touched that. I want to learn more about testing as well. I started to use a library called Detox, which does like espresso on Android. It's like a wrapper around espresso and then wrapper around Earl Grey, I think, on iOS, which is pretty cool. I want to learn about GraphQL and Apollo. Apparently, it's the new big thing, and that would almost remove the use of Redux, because you could use that to do like asynchronous fetching and have like the state of your loading state and stuff like that. I want to learn about code push, which is amazing apparently, because you can basically push updates to your app on over the air without going through the stores. And we're Android dev, so for us it's not a big deal because you get an update in 2 hours on the Play Store. But on iOS, it's like it can take like 2 days, and you have to go through review and stuff like that. So code push is like bypassing that by just uploading basically your JS files on the server, and then your app is going to check if there's new files to update, basically. So I want to learn that, and then a little bit of trolling myself, I guess. I don't know. Why not Flutter? So I'm definitely going to attend the talk this evening to learn about that. And that's it.
So we actually do have time for a few questions. If anybody does have any questions they'd like to ask, come over here.
Hello. Okay. So my question is, earlier in the day we had like a session on accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's something that you've taken up with React.
I haven't looked at that yet, but I think the fact that it's building native widgets, I think you have the same. Actually, I'm using those content description for the images and stuff like that. So yeah, you can use the same accessibility features as Android and iOS.
Do you have any other questions from the audience? Oh, one in the back. Oh, come
around. For some people who may be using Angular 2 and Cordova,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the advantage of moving to React Native instead?
So again, Cordova, if I go back to that slide with the little hat, like you definitely will get a hat. You don't get a castle. You get like a look and feel of a website. So it loads like a website. It feels like a website when you click buttons. You don't get like the ripples. You don't get like native feel that you get with native or React Native because it builds native widgets basically.
Cool. Any other questions here? Over here. Sorry.
Hi, I just want to ask you, had shown a picture of a castle and a small hut. So before, you actually started working on this, right? So now that you know a lot about this, do you still think that it's still a hut, or it's getting better?
Good question. I think for me, like, because I had that learning curve, like I had to learn all the JS and React and stuff, I still had to go through that maze. And the castle is pretty much the same castle. Maybe it's missing like one dungeon. And maybe the perf is not like exactly there, but I find that, actually, no, the big thing is like, yeah, you would need to do 2 mazes and yeah, to have one castle, and that now you just do one. You have like 2 apps, like you, yeah, basically have 2 apps at once. So yeah, it's not a hut, it's a castle.
Got that analogy straightened out. That's a good thing. Any other questions? Yeah. Can somebody pass the mic?
Hi, thanks for the talk. Just wondering about how you get your designers on board when you have a designer that tries to explicitly design for Apple or for Google on your team. So like they try to conform to Google like material design and whatever the built-in is for Apple. How do you get them on board to do this? I'm assuming React Native kind of is like an in-between approach, so maybe it doesn't go true Apple or true Google. Like how do you?
Good question, yeah. So I got lucky because the designer on my team is like, we only have one designer, and so she wants the same design on both, right? But from like the fact that it's React Native, it builds native widgets. Like you can build native buttons that look and feel like iOS, and at the same time on Android as well. Like you have navigation as well. You can use bottom tabs on Android or iOS, and then a drawer on Android if you want. But ideally, you want the same design. And if you have 2 designers, one is like pure Android designer and one is pure iOS designer, it's gonna probably be trickier than if you have one designer who actually like most of the time when you have one designer and you have 2 teams like iOS and Android, and they don't build the same thing, the designer is like, why are you doing this and you're doing that? Like, I wanted this. Like, so I think it's better for that case. If you have multiple designers, then they need to be on board. I found that using that component library thing, it's super convenient for designers, because like you can define exactly like the button, all the buttons are gonna look like that, like, or our titles are gonna look like this, and you can share that with the designer, and they love that. Like they used to that with the web, the web word, and when they see that on mobile, it's like amazing for them.
Great presentation. So recently Airbnb posted like a 5-part article about how they're moving away from React Native. And not to draw a comparison to this, but they did it because of complexities in their app. In your experience working with React Native, do you feel like a project can grow in size to the point where now your app complexities have reached kind of their peak with React Native, and you feel like it's better to just go native?
Good question. I knew someone would ask about that 5-part Airbnb blog post. It was a big thing in the React Native world, I guess, because they were the biggest contributor outside of Facebook. But I think if you read it, it's more like political reasons, and also the fact that they have a hybrid app, right? They have native plus React Native, and it's the bridging between the 2 that is kind of tricky for them. And I started like 100% React Native, which they call greenfield apps, and that seems like it's the consensus. Like it's much easier to do that than adding React Native to an existing app, which Airbnb did. And then it was political because they had not enough native devs they could hire, and they had a lot of JS devs that used that. And then as soon as they were able to hire more native devs, then they didn't need the React Native anymore. So, yeah.
So do you think an app can grow in complexity?
Oh, so complexity-wise, I think React makes it way easier than pure native on Android and iOS, because like composing like views and fragments and activities and stuff like that on Android, it's like a pain, and on React Native it's just composing components, and it's like it's meant to be like that. So if you have like if you can scale like so easily, you can have like a base like component library that everybody uses, and then you build your features, and I think it's much easier to scale with React Native actually.
I was going to try to fit one more question, but I think we do have to wrap there to get the next one set up. So please, one more round of applause for